Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to be your MC for today, back for our third day of the Internet 2.0 conference, brought to you by Flip Investors, Crypto Clue, Boerger Consulting LLC, and FlowPatterns. I can't believe it's already the last day. Can you guys? Yeah. Well, the good news is we have two upcoming events that you can join us at. We are going to be in Dubai at the beginning of May, and then we are going to be back here in Vegas July 10th through the 12th at Caesars Forum, which is a brand new conference center that they've built here in Vegas. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you guys will all be able to join us in July. So far, we have covered everything from women in robotics to the Internet of Things to the Internet of Behaviors. It's time to take this discussion up a notch. So let's host the first session of our day as a panel discussion. Our subject experts, Nadine Cino, the LEED AP CEO and co-founder of TygaSmart, Christopher Sabourin, founder and CEO of FlowPatterns, Cameron Jungers, the co-founder and CEO of Filot LLC, and Jeremy Boerger, the CEO of Boerger Consulting LLC, will share their viewpoints on the topic incentivizing blockchain adoption. Let's welcome our panelists to the stage.
Here he comes. So hold the microphone closer to your mouth. My name is Jeremy Boerger. I'll be playing the part of moderator today. And as Christopher approaches the stage, to kick off, let's do a quick introduction and answer two questions. One, to define what blockchain is from your perspective. And then the second is, what do we mean by incentivize? Because that's the question that we're going to be discussing today, incentivizing blockchain adoption. So, Morgan, go ahead.
Right. So my name is Cameron Jungers. I'm the co-founder.
Cameron, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Filot. We are a cybersecurity company with our tech corely based within the blockchain. We founded recently. My business partner is here as well, Filot LLC, and so we'll be talking a lot about the core innovations within the blockchain that have been happening recently and how they are affecting the future incentivization of the blockchain.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nadine Cino, and I am the CEO and co-inventor of TygaSmart. As an impact inventor, I'm really excited about this discussion on the blockchain, specifically because there's a lot of confusion around it. What's the value of a private blockchain? What's the value of a public blockchain? Where are the records more immutable? And I think this conversation will help to clarify that so that we can all extract the best value out of blockchain.
My name is Christopher Sabourin. I'm the founder and CEO of FlowPatterns and a lifelong entrepreneur. For me, blockchain creates the immutable, essentially bookkeeping for time. And really the value for me is not so much in the cryptocurrency aspect of the investment aspect, rather the core capability of that. And for me, with what we're doing in FlowPatterns, I see blockchain is creating a path for employees that start off all the way towards retirement, where there is an immutable transfer of information from employer to employer that keeps them moving in an upward direction, along with many other things, because that is lacking in employment. There are things that are used other than objective material to determine pay rate and all these things disrupt things towards retirement. And so that's one portion along with other areas.
Yeah. And then my company, Boerger Consulting, focuses on hardware and software asset management inside the IT and computer sphere. We see value in blockchain in tracking the transfer of use rights, especially on the software and subscription-based licensing. From one entity to the next, a mutable chain of custody, if you will. So getting to the incentivization, one of the big issues that my industry is facing is that 40% of a software publisher's sales revenue is generated by software audits, squeezing their existing customers by saying, you are using more of our software than we think you are, you owe us money. And the benefits of blockchain would be allowed to not only help the corporate clients and the end users defend against such accusations, but also help the software publishers because they don't have to pay a auditing organization like KPMG, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and the like to run those audits and get that 40%. So with that in mind, when it comes to incentivizing, the trouble that my industry has been having is getting away from this model. Too many people really believe that this is the only way it works. So Christopher, if I can pass to you, what barriers do you see for adoption of blockchain, and what sorts of incentives should we be offering for better adoption?
Wonderful question. Thank you. So I think along with blockchain comes this concept that we have become more and more comfortable with, which is transparency. There are a lot of reasons for folks to not want transparency. And this creates problems. So for me, I think that's one of the big barriers there. So that, along with just understanding and feeling comfortable with what blockchain is also another thing. Because right now, blockchain for a lot of people means cryptocurrency. And that is just one tiny little bit. So those two things, I think, if we can get over those, like really identify the core reason that blockchain is so powerful, whether you're in this country or that country, and the transfer of that information, and also that transparency that has to come along with it, where you can actually see exactly where, yes, that is actually correct. Then that is, if we can get there, then I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, so right. So following on the same idea, blockchain technology as it stands today is corely based on the crypto model. There is NFTs obviously as a part of that, but a lot of what blockchain is right now is thought of as just this sort of financial tool, a way for people to make money, maybe a quick buck. But blockchain in and of itself, the actual core technology, is super powerful. It's powerful in these ways. It's able to track and prove ownership of objects, is able to show chain of custody, chain of command. And there's so many different implementations that is available with the blockchain that just isn't being explored right now. And so I think that's really the core of what we want to talk about today, is trying to incentivize to talk about all of the ways that blockchain could be being used, where a lot of our panelists are doing different things with the blockchain. None of us are corely based in crypto. It's all different implementations of this amazing base software.
Yes, so I'd like to add that for our customers, TygaSmart is really a B2B business tool, helping companies keep track of their corporate assets, such as furniture and computing devices, anything along those lines. One of the things that we have uncovered is an opportunity for corporates to demonstrate their ESG, social corporate responsibility, by utilizing a blockchain. This is how it would work. Right now, at this point in time, ESG lacks standards. One of the things that blockchain can do very, very simply is establish the standards so that when there's a report that's made by a corporation, we're able to compare apples to apples to apples, rather than the way it is done now, which is a verbal explanation with little data to back it up. And the data that is available to back it up isn't necessarily verifiable. So when it comes to ESGs, the importance of actually conforming to some kind of a standard, and the requirement for corporations to perform on the ESGs, because it is valuable to the future generations on our planet, ESG and blockchain were sort of like made to go together. And that is what our company is doing.
Now, just to be clear, ESG, if you would be so kind as to
Oh.
define, just to make sure that everybody is
My
is clear.
apology,
No
right?
worries.
Okay, so ESG stands for environmental social governance, and it does require compliance with governmental oversight or other types of regulations. Why ESG is important to corporations who are our customers is because Wall Street is looking very carefully at their risk management for climate impacts, and everything that they do with respect to their climate behavior is reflected in their ESG reporting. And so the more that they're doing in a conscious and intentional way to improve their carbon profile, for example, they're using less carbon, they're achieving net zero or something along those lines. These are the types of things that Wall Street is looking at in terms of evaluating what is the real health of that company. When they look at their social governance, what about diversity, inclusion, belonging? All of that gets rolled into these ESG reports. So you can see the critical need for having an immutable blockchain, a transparent record that allows for no wiggle room so that we're comparing apples to apples. So,
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because it's such a big topic and very important. So in my presentation, I mentioned I'm a hard-nosed capitalist. Yes. And ESG is a very big topic of discussion around corporations. I'm also a dad. And so I want to have a world for my grandchildren. And so I have two parts. ESG is going to become more and more critical. In fact, I would encourage retirement programs and such to weave this into how they select a company. Are they selecting companies that are actually, because retirement is a long-term proposal. Are you selecting companies that are strong in ESG, that have developed these metrics? Because, well, it doesn't make sense if you're, you're a retirement program, which is supposed to be a long-term vision, and you're selecting companies without any type of impact ability. So ESG, as a capitalist, it has to come center. We have a world, and we need to weave this in. And for us, it's in FlowPatterns, it's more of the social aspect. So this is where we kind of come in with the S part of ESG. It's very important.
So I think here is a good point. I believe we've got one more microphone orbiting around. We can take questions from the audience if there's any that want to jump in and add to the discussion, where we'll be happy to hear from you. But Cameron, you had something you were winding up like you were going to add to that.
Yeah, so the ESG reporting, obviously, it's a super useful thing for the blockchain. The blockchain is, the blockchain is an immutable record, right? It is able to show exactly what happens at any given point in time, but it's not being used for this kind of thing right now. It's not being used for that ability that it has to actually show proof of ownership throughout the stages. It's not being used for the ability that it has to make sure that no one can go back and actually change these records. And a big reason for this, obviously, is that the way that blockchain was introduced to everyone was through the financial aspects. It was through the crypto, it was through the NFTs. And so having those two be corely linked, the actual pure tech, it's been lost in the folds. Versus now, a lot of our companies and a lot of companies overall are actually trying to improve and adapt this model towards other facilities. And one of the key distinctions I want to make, and one of the things that I want to bring up on this note, is that blockchain is not just one thing, right? There are different types of blockchains. There are different blockchains that are created by different companies. And one of the key differences between them is sort of a public versus a private blockchain, right? The ability to have a blockchain be centralized or decentralized. These are different aspects of this same core technology that allows for different versions of the implementation. So for example, for my company, for Filot, we are a decentralized blockchain that functions in a similar way to many centralized blockchains are, but with the added benefit of actually being separate from ourselves. So for anyone who doesn't know, a decentralized blockchain is one where the creator of the blockchain has no controlling ownership over what's actually happening. They create it, and then it is completely given to the public. So when a record is created, it is completely up to all of the owners of the nodes, or in our case, all of the individual documents, to actually make sure that that record is valid. Versus with a centralized blockchain, such as with some of the more recent controversies, with an FTX, for example, it's a blockchain where the actual owner, the creator, is able to go back and is able to change things. And so it's created a lot of doubt within the industry about the actual immutable aspect, even though the core technology, it still is immutable. It's just the fact that people are using different little aspects of blockchain to change that core aspect, and give it sort of a bad reputation, when in reality, the actual core tech, it has no reputation. The reputation is just what we make of it.
So I want to bring the discussion kind of back to center, if we will. The technology is great, but the subject needs to be incentivization. And we as an industry are having trouble finding a good use that sticks for blockchain. And I brought up, as we were planning our discussion, the Maersk IBM partnership for bills of lading, to automate bills of lading, moving cargo and the documents of tracking that cargo through ports of call to the receiver, from shipper to supplier to purchaser. That is now going to spin down for lack of investment and interest. So how do we encourage adoption of blockchain in our respective industries? Nadine, you're wound up, you're ready to go.
I am. You see, because, what's behind the ESGs when it comes to scope 3 emissions is the supply chain. So if you take a look at bill of ladings is one aspect of the supply chain. But the supply chain, as we all know, is made up of quite a number of steps that precede that final bill of lading when you're actually shipping a manufactured good, right? So what you have in terms of blockchain and its application to supply chain is, what is the source of the raw material? Is that actually coming from a managed forest, if it's a paper product, or is it coming from a poached forest? What is the labor profile? Are we talking about forced labor? Are we talking about other things in terms of the labor pool? Are we talking about downstream impacts of polluting facilities that are just dumping, effluents into the waters? How is that impacting downstream? So when you take a look at the power of blockchain to incentivize cleaning up our supply chains and becoming very transparent about that, and you have the ability now, for the first time ever, to look at considering natural capital as a cost of goods sold on the balance sheet. When you think about how you can adjust the gap rules to, or not adjust them, but add to that other factors that would add to the cost of goods sold, it changes the whole pricing on manufacturing. The incentivization is beyond imagination, like what blockchain can really do to our future world in terms of right-sizing it for the planet and right-sizing it for communities that have been overlooked and underrepresented and frankly disregarded. What their well-being is, just disregarded, so that we could get that cheap product from wherever it's coming from. So I'm not spending more than $5.99 for whatever it is that I need. It's enough. And that's what blockchain will do. I'll get off my soapbox.
So, no. Right. So following that same idea, I think the core thing, what you're talking about for the incentivization of blockchain, is actually boiling it down from this sort of big word, this blockchain, this technology, to actually what it does, what the blockchain can do for us, what the blockchain can do for the world overall, I think that's the key part of the incentivization is actually it's taking away the mystique and just looking at it for what it is. The immutable record, the ability to track for ESG reporting, to track a person's work history, the ability to protect files better than anything else. What the actual blockchain can do for the world, for individuals, is I think what's going to end up incentivizing it. It's what's going to end up pushing it to the forefront rather than sort of the ideas surrounding it, the ideas that you can make money on it, the ideas that there's sort of this give and take. It's the blockchain has its uses, and those uses I think are what's going to drive it forward into the future.
So I have a good incentive. Retirement. There are a lot of folks, I've worked all over the world, and virtually, thank you. And you know, there's huge variations in income. I mean, at the base level, $40 for this person, $7 for that person. Do the same thing. And then also, how do these folks get from, like I mentioned, starting to retirement? When you can have what is essentially, so blockchain is, think of it as bookkeeping worldwide. I mean, and that you can't change. Bookkeeping worldwide can't change, and everybody agrees, and then you move on. So, and you can look back. So these incentives create opportunities. The blockchain creates the ability for people to have a journey, an epic journey, a story from start to end. I started work and now I'm elderly and I have a way to retire, and it's quite clear, takes that away. So there's, and also recognition for things that you did that nobody can take away, that you can then carry forward. So there's a, while without actually being strapped to that person necessarily, where it's them as the blockchain, it's their work.
Right.
So that is a huge incentive, because for the folks that I work with, they're wanting to figure out how they're going to retire at 60, right? And they shouldn't have to do that if they worked all those years. Yeah.
So I think my industry probably gives the best counterpoint. The de-incentive is that too much money is being made with the way things are right now. And too often, the assumption is you can't change it. Oops, sorry. I'm usually better about my microphone than that. You can't change, did it again, the way things are. Audits are going to happen as part of the de rigueur contract negotiation and execution with software publishers, because software publishers are losing a lot of money to software piracy, and that affects their shareholder returns on investment. So I'm going to throw it out again. How do we incentivize to the point that we can change the concept and get some of these detractors on board? So Nadine, I think you've got a really good answer for this. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's completely on point with your specific question, but I do want to talk about incentivizing, because at the end of the day, incentivizing boils down to money. Plain and simple. Okay. Now, why do I talk so much about the ESGs? The ESGs are important, not unto themselves as a recording instrument. What's important is that they document the accumulation of carbon credits or offsets, or the deficit of carbon, creating a carbon debt. And that debt needs to be paid off annually by the corporation who incurred the debt. And so now you have a financial dollar value for a ton of carbon. So the more you accumulate, whether that's through offsets or credits as a corporation, A, your record looks better on Wall Street. B, to the extent that you have business units that are creating carbon deficits, you get to cancel them out on your own balance sheet, and you can still be a carbon net zero company. That is really valuable, because the projected price for a ton of carbon is going from $28 a ton currently to 50 some odd dollars a ton or $200 a ton within 20 years.
Mhm.
That's incentive.
Unfortunately, and Nadine and I were coming to blows at lunch. It was actually quite fun. Unfortunately, these sorts of trends, I don't think, well, let me put it this way, are very difficult to happen organically. That there needs to be an outside force that needs to put pressure on the existing paradigm in order to get it to shift to the new idea. And I fear that's got to come from either international law or local governments. So, and Christopher, as the unabashed capitalist, I suspect you have some thoughts. Go ahead.
I do, and it's counter to my typical way of thinking, right? Because you have to be flexible at the same
Mhm.
time and understand when something's better for all and not just yourself. And so I agree, unfortunately. I agree. What do I see as the pressure point? I do see retirement, large retirement facilities that bring in companies for their beneficiaries as a bottleneck, as a weak point where government could say, look, it's quite clear we're changing the world here and there, and the retirements are long-term thinking. Therefore, retirements, you have a obligation to request ESG metrics to make that part of your portfolio so that you're not investing in things unintentionally. As a small fry myself, pay into my retirement account that actually is antithetical to my grandchildren's life or my great grandchildren. So to me, I see retirement, large retirement, sorry, retirement folks, but it's true, as a critical point that could easily, quickly change the landscape.
Excellent. I want to insert a short comment about highlight what you said about the unintentional insertion of undesirable assets, right? Right now, the federal government is undergoing a software audit of itself over the course of the last 90 days is trying to get a catalog of off the shelf software that could have potential cybersecurity risks. And I believe, Cameron, that is your wheelhouse. So what do you think about these intentional or unintentional risks?
Right. So to answer that and to go back to your point on the monetary incentivization, right now within my specific industry, within the cybersecurity industry, there is that pressure from an outside source, but that outside source is actually attackers. So specifically, my software is designed to prevent ransomware attacks, a specific type of malware, a specific type of attack. And a lot of people don't know, but ransomware attacks right now are the biggest they've ever been. There are organizations, many based out of Russia, that like the Conti ransomware group, like Lapsus, that have been breaking into international organizations basically weekly, getting into hundreds of millions of dollars of documents and exposing it to the public, deleting them, taking entire companies off the grid for multiple weeks at a time. So that pressure that's being enforced there, that I think is what's going to push the blockchain into the cybersecurity realm, because that pressure is allowing us to come in and go, right now, the stuff that you have, it may be making you money, but it's not working. The cybersecurity that exists right now, it's not really preventing these attacks. And so to come in with a completely new technology, such as blockchain, to come in with something that actually can change it, that can shift the scales in the side of protection, I think that as an outside force can be what actually ends up incentivizing it within my own industry. And I was wondering with the other panelists if there's any sort of force like that, as you asked about before, within your industries that actually might provide that pressure to create the change that we're actually looking for.
Since I have the mic, I can respond to that one first. The pressure right now is well, actually, as you're right, it is from multiple vectors, cybersecurity and the need to protect personal identifiable information and corporate identifiable information. There is regulations wrapped around enforcing the rules on best business practices around data. But also there is a time cost that needs to be considered as well. One of the benefits of blockchain is that it is hyper reactionary due to the programmable contracts, the smart contracts that end up handling the communication between the contractual parties. For something like service management inside very large organizations, human beings can't keep up. So a short-term capital investment on blockchain can actually help free up human resources to pay more attention to cybersecurity vectors. So Nadine, you've got the microphone if you want to add on to that. And oh, I'm sorry, before you do, we are coming up on the 10-minute mark. If there are any questions from the audience, please come up and join in the conversation.
Please do. So I think, Cameron, you make a very good point. So sometimes we think in terms of incentivizing, and I said it's all about money. And it always looks like incentivizing is sort of like a good thing, right? But in the case of what you're talking about, the incentive is cost avoidance. What does it cost a company to be down and out? What does it cost a company to have all their data stolen? I mean, that putting some of them out of business, right? So that is a very severe penalty. What I do want to say, though, to your point, Jeremy, about what is the pressure? The pressure actually is government. When it comes to ESGs, right now, Scope 1 and Scope 2 are regulated, required, check the box, you got to comply, or you get fined. And the fines can be hundreds of millions of dollars by the time you get done with everything. Now, what's happening in Scope 3 emissions, which is the piece that is the largest piece of all, because it talks about supply chain, it talks to smart contracts, it talks to all of the things that technology can actually improve in terms of how we source, manufacture, and ship our goods. That conversation appears to be moving towards legalization and compliance very quickly within the early part of 2023. If that happens, ESGs are going to become the most sought after. The scramble will be pretty amazing. And we're going to be bringing blockchain to the accounting part of how you track your ESG behavior so that we can help companies verify and comply quickly and easily.
Thank you. Beautiful. When you mentioned smart contracts, it's a very important aspect for what we do. Why? Think of all the small businesses, all the employees, all those people maybe get a 3% increase annually, but they forgot at that time. And yeah, forget at that time. And I don't know if you deserve enough this time. And all this stuff. Smart contracts connected to a block, you automatically get your pay increase. You automatically you look at how much you're working. You automatically, so it creates, with transparency comes a certain degree of discomfort. But what does it do? It moves you more from the takers to the givers. And there's a shade. Are you a taking company? Are you doing this to take versus give? And this type of transparency, I believe, will also reduce that taking aspect over time.
So when you're talking about transparency, and as Nadine mentioned, the government being so important to the way that blockchain can be incentivized, I was wondering what the panel thinks about the government's potential role in the future of blockchain, because as blockchain at its inception, a lot of people promoted it as sort of the end of the governmental regulation. They said, oh, it's decentralized, we can manage ourselves. We can't, probably. And the government, I think, is going to be a big part of what actually ends up incentivizing, ends up being the cause of the next sort of movement of blockchain. I was wondering what you guys think about what the government's role actually will be in sort of applying the blockchain to your various industries.
That is a great question. So right now, government is making regulations outside of the blockchain. And whether that be HIPAA or some kind of ESG or whatever it is, these are all regulations outside of the blockchain. I think what makes your question so interesting is, will the government accept blockchain reports as validation for compliance? Because it's immutable, particularly if it's on a decentralized blockchain, and you never know. I don't have a good answer, but I love your question.
Well, I would push back and say, so the short answer is I agree with you that it needs to come from the collective government. But one of the things that I would push back on is, why do we assume that the government is this monolithic external force? Especially in the United States and most of the world, we have functioning democratic processes. It is us, the people in the room, the people online, that participate in the government and should be electing representatives that are encouraging blockchain usage in order to enforce corporate compliance with ESG or time cost or investment due diligence research.
So, no, I totally agree. And I think what you're really saying there, and what I really, I love that as an answer to the question, is that it's up to all of us. It's up to the sort of the US, the people of the United States and the people of countries around the world to actually to put people into places of power where they can help to bring in this new age of the blockchain. Because I agree, and my own thoughts on my own question is that I believe that the government is going to play a pivotal role in the implementation of the blockchain. I don't know if they're going to accept the blockchain as a order of compliance in the same way that they didn't accept it for securities exchange for crypto. And so I'm not sure what the government exactly is going to do, but I know that it's going to be a pivotal role. And I know that we as an audience and we as a people in general are going to have the ability to affect the way that the government, as not just this monolith, but as our own government, is going to impact the blockchain.
Well, to your point, crypto is different from blockchain, and a private blockchain is very different from a public blockchain, right? And so I think that as there's discussion with government agencies, it needs to be clear which flavor of blockchain are we talking about?
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
I agree.
And so that there can be an absolute immutable record that can be changed by no one. But I think you also touched on something else. At least here in America, this is a country that is governed, it's for the people and by the people. Blockchain actually mathematically makes it visible in real time what people are agreeing to. And I think that's pretty astonishing.
So I want to add one little piece, on YouTube, you can find a video with Peter Drucker and Michelle Hunt. And in that, there's a executive order, a request on how to improve the efficiency of the executive office. That was 20 years ago. So in order, when we talk about government, we talk about blockchain, the government itself, like you discussed, also has to catch up. They also, to be able to be part of these discussions, they also have to change themselves to become more efficient too.
And I think that is an excellent point to stop.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Or start.
Oh, yes, or start. Yes, maybe there is a nice bar and grill downstairs that we might be able to pick back up at lunch. No, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Panelists, thank you so much for your comments and insights. Ladies and gentlemen, I will turn it back to our host.